Hey everyone, it's me, Augie. I mentioned this in the podcast before, but I just wanted to clarify at the beginning here too that the numbers that I list in the coronavirus section of this podcast were all as of April 11th of 2020. So by the time this podcast is uploaded, those numbers will almost certainly be out of date, and it's very possible that a ton of news has accumulated in even the past 24 hours. So just bear that in mind and enjoy the show. Hello everyone and welcome to the very first episode of Stranded the Podcast. I am your host, Augie Chappis, and boy do we have some news for you today. Today, the United States has officially passed Italy in terms of coronavirus deaths, which means that we are now number one in coronavirus deaths, and we're going to get into that. And we're also going to be looking at the effective end to the Democratic primary, as Bernie Sanders has officially suspended his campaign, making Joe Biden the presumptive nominee. We're going to get into all of that. But first, a little bit into why I started a podcast, because I have friends and family who have asked, Augie, why did you decide to do this? And, I've always kind of wanted to have a podcast for a while now, probably because I've got a big head and think I'm always right for some reason, even though I'm definitely not. But, no, in all seriousness, I've kind of always wanted to have a podcast. And I remember trying to start one a few years back, and the only reason that never came out, because I actually had someone who wanted to host with me, and so we set everything up. We actually got a show recorded. We actually did everything that we needed to do. But the only problem with that was that I didn't really know how to compress files. And as a result, I never got the file released to the public because I just couldn't upload it. It was too much for my internet, because internet here sucks. But the important thing is, here I am. I have got a great podcast for you. I feel like this is going to be a fantastic show. And of course, if you love the show, be sure to keep an eye on my Anchor page, and follow me on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. When this finally comes out on there, it takes 7 to 10 days. So this episode is probably going to come out before I even am up on there. But be sure to follow me on that, or whatever platform you choose to. It's on a whole bunch of stuff. So you should have plenty of options to listen to this podcast. Now, before I go any further, I want to put a little caveat here into what I'm about to say. I am not a medical expert. I am not in any way very knowledgeable in terms of the medical field. Trust me. I have absolutely no authority in this world whatsoever. But then again, most of the people talking about this really don't either. I mean, really, it should be the doctors and stuff talking about this, which, people are trying to do. But even then, I don't know as much, so just bear with me. I'm just going off of mainly what I know, which isn't a whole lot, because my specialty isn't in the medical field, it's with aviation. So just bear with me as I talk about this. If I make a mistake, it's not intentional. I'm not trying to lie. And feel free to call me out on it, I'm sure. So as I just mentioned, I actually had filmed a portion of this podcast before, and now I'm partly redoing it because of this, partly because the first section sucked. But as I was getting ready to refilm, the country was just announced that we had surpassed Italy in terms of coronavirus deaths, which, as I said before, means that we are now the number one nation in terms of deaths. And actually, I'm going to pull up the current death rate here. There's actually a nice a table showing all of the coronavirus deaths and cases, with, of course, New York accounting for the vast majority of it, which would make sense. New York is, especially in New York City, is a lot more crammed. And you could argue that New York and New York City, their initial response was not good at all. However, I will say, based on what I've heard, the response after the fact has been a lot better, based on what I'm hearing. But again, I don't know as much. I don't live in New York at all. I'm a resident of Kansas, the good old flat state, so bear with me on that. But if we scroll here, then we got New Jersey, Michigan. But yeah, according to this count, As of right now, we are at 20,086 deaths with 28,587 recoveries. And of course, those recovery numbers are bound to go up exponentially probably over time, because it takes a lot longer to report a recovery, obviously, than it takes to report a death. So which is good news. But we have we don't know what the death rate's going to be, but we're hoping, or what we think, not really hoping, but what we think it is around, I believe, 2 or 3%, for those of you that don't know. So that's what we're kind of dealing with right now. So, and then if we look at Kansas, which is the state I'm from, we are at 1,268 cases total with 102 added today. Wow. It's not even the end of the day yet. And with 55 deaths total, 5 deaths reported today. And today, as I'm filming this, is April 11th, by the way. So I'm sure this is going to be more tomorrow when I upload this podcast. So that's why the numbers are probably off when you're comparing it. But anyway. But of course, I'm not here to list the death numbers and the case numbers, because anyone can look those up. That's not why I am here right now. I'm here to talk about just the reaction of people at this point. And of course, I see 3 kinds of people. And those people are the people that are overreacting, the people that are underreacting, and the people that are taking this relatively rationally. And so what do I mean by that? The people that I see that are overreacting, per se, are the people that are just absolutely losing it over this virus. And although honestly, I haven't seen as much of that, which I guess isn't surprising. That's the opposite of human nature. We'll get to that in a moment. But I mean, there's people that of course are going to be upset, somewhat understandably, but there's going to be people that take this too far. Of course, you see the panic buying that's occurring in stores right now, which is absolutely ridiculous. And of course, it's causing stores to implement policies which could arguably hurt bigger families right now. Like Walmart. The other day, my family tried to go out and buy some meat. We tried to buy, I think, just 2 packages, which isn't panic buying. It's just trying to buy meat for our family. And the person at the cashier goes, "Yeah, I saw you can only buy 1." Which, I understand the point, but come on. Like, some families need more than 1, okay? That's not panic buying, that's just trying to buy enough for your family. But anyway, but that's not what I'm talking about here. But my point is, there's those kinds of people that are just overreacting, panic buying, ruining things for everyone else. And of course, I'm sure some of the people watching this are going, "Augie, you are that kind of person." Well, no, I'm not. I'm trying to take this relatively rationally, actually. But, I'll get to that as well. Then there's the people that are underreacting. And this kind of group tends to range from people who don't care about the virus, or who understand what this is, and but they just don't care, to the people that are going as far as to making conspiracies about this. I'm talking Bill Gates has caused the virus levels of conspiracy, and yes, I've actually seen this online. It's kind of ridiculous. But this is the time we live in, people. And then there's the more rational group. And it's the people that aren't overreacting to this. It's the people that aren't panic buying. The people aren't losing their minds over this thing. But also the people that understand that we have to sacrifice some things for a little while in order to defeat this. Because that's the only way we defeat anything. There has to be sacrifices made. Because people should understand that we should rather have a little bit of disappointment, a little bit of... We'd rather have some of our plans ruined than just absolutely letting lots of people die. I mean, don't get me wrong. Right now, I would rather be in my college, flying planes, and I would rather be studying with all my friends, but here I am at home recording this podcast. This podcast probably wouldn't exist had this whole virus not happened. Actually, there's been a lot of things that wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for this virus, if you want me to be honest. But I'm not as interested in analyzing the different kinds of reactions to this virus more than I am the conspiracy theories, because of course those are the fun ones that I like to look at. The Alex Jones level of just stuff. Of course, people don't listen to Alex Jones as much anymore because, I mean, his YouTube channel got taken down, what was it, a year or 2 ago? Of course, I missed the memes from that, and so, of course, as you expect, there's going to be misinformation about this. There's misinformation nowadays about just about everything. But the level of crap that I have seen is crazy. Here's an article from the New York Times about just a few of these. Let's see. If we look, there's lots of people suggesting, for example, as I mentioned, Bill Gates is funding this virus, or he created this virus. And it's, I believe, because he said something about controlling the population and overpopulation. And first off, he's not saying, oh yeah, we're going to inject people with vaccines and then we're going to go and kill off the little children. No, that's not obviously what he means. Like, come on, people. Because it took me literally a minute. I literally searched for a minute. Because someone on Instagram told me this. It's like, yeah, this is what he's doing. Literally took me a minute to search. Literally found that what he actually meant. So what he means by this, people, is that, like, by the way, in case you haven't noticed, the population of first world countries is declining. And that's mainly because we have gone through our phase of going to a complete first world country. I mean, the same thing's happening in other countries. However, in a lot of places like in Africa, for example, you see a lot of underdevelopment, and the population, or the people who, my point is, there tends to be a lot of people that have a lot more children. And, I mean, the sad thing is, it's because there's a lot of children that die due to malnourishment, due to diseases, things like that. And so what Bill Gates is saying is that if we can get vaccines out, and if we can make people healthy, most people will want to have less children. And as a result, population booms aren't as likely. The data shows that in lots of countries. This is just an assumed thing. That once countries are healthier, and once things are more stable, people just tend to have less children. Obviously, not every family chooses to do this. Some families choose to have lots of children, and there's not necessarily anything wrong with that. Obviously. I mean, some people like having big families and can afford that, and there's nothing wrong with that. However, in general, that tends to be the general trend, and that's what he's talking about. Is because people like him are worried about water shortages, food shortages, and I mean, some of that stuff, the evidence shows, could be on the horizon. Obviously, we're not there yet, and people like Bill Gates are concerned about people's health and also want to prevent that at the same time. That's what he's talking about. He's not talking about killing people with vaccines. Okay? Let's be real here. Let's be realistic. But of course, people want to interpret whatever they want out of people. They say something that seems a little off, and of course, they're going to take that out as they will. And then there's arguably my favorite, and most nonsensical conspiracy. It's, of course, 5G, which, of course, there's been conspiracy theories about 5G before. There's been all kinds of stuff. I'm sure you've seen the articles. If not, look it up. It's fantastic. But all these people want to just stop 5G because, it's this awful thing. It's the same thing that happened with Wi-Fi, effectively. People like Jill Stein questioning if Wi-Fi is hurting our kids, which it's not. It's really not. But, of course, people are going to question it. And so now, people in Britain the UK, they're burning cell towers. And I think I read actually one article title that said, their companies are politely asking them to stop burning their towers. Like, yeah, we're going to politely ask people to stop destroying our property. But, again, 5G, no, it's not spreading the coronavirus. It's not killing people. But, of course, people want to believe this stuff. And some of you might be asking, Augie, why do people come up with this stuff? Augie, why do people want to believe this stuff? The answer is, I don't know, for sure. I don't know what everyone's logic is, but from a personal perspective, people are just afraid of just the fact that some things are unexplained. Some things happen that are bad. There's not some secret evil organization at hand in every single thing, obviously. Some things happen. And it's just the way it is. And sometimes we just have to deal with bad things in life. And sometimes we have to deal with things that aren't in our favor. Not just because it's something bad doesn't mean that it's a conspiracy theory. But there's some people out there who want to associate every bad thing with someone or something. They want to have a cause. They want someone to blame. They want someone to punish for what they did. They want someone who's the equivalent of Hitler, that they can say, oh, this man is evil. This man caused this many people to die. This man is trying to kill us all. When, of course, you can't do that with everything. You just can't. That'd be like trying to pin the blame on a tornado on the President of the United States, for example. Which I'm sure people are going to compare that to my statement on that was to the hurricanes and stuff. That's a whole nother discussion. And that's certainly up for discussion in another episode, I'm sure. If that ever comes up again. But my point here is that no, there's no conspiracy on the coronavirus. And we should take this seriously. Because here's the thing. Now, no, not every place is like New York. But that's what we're trying to work towards. The thing is, the fact that there aren't as many people in hospitals right now is a huge indication that social distancing is working. And the big thing right now is that, how do we balance this out? Do we focus more on the economy? Do we focus more on people's health? I'd argue we should focus more on people's health because, without people, you don't have an economy. And that's just a fact. I think, in my opinion anyway, I would hope that people's lives matter more than the economy does because that's just the way it is. Because, why should I focus on some person making money more than someone I know in their lives? I know people. Personally, do I know anyone with the virus personally? No. But I know other people who do know someone with the virus. And they say it sucks to know that their friends, in some cases family, they have the virus. And in one case, one person might die, mind you. So, this is serious. And if we lift these bans too early, then things could go wrong things could go wrong and fast. Like, there's articles now, there's experts saying that if we lift this virus too early, dang it. This isn't going in bloopers. If we lift this lockdown, this social distancing thing too early, more people are going to die. In fact, there's some models that show that if we lift this too early, things might actually get worse than they would have if we would just done nothing. Or with minimal social distancing regulations. So we have to be careful. We have to be very careful as to what our response is going to be. And it's not an easy decision. Look, I'm not a huge Trump fan, really. That's probably understating it, but I understand that he's got a tough situation. Our country has not dealt with this in a long time. And honestly, nothing like this virus before. If you want me to be completely honest. And I'm not sure if there's really a right decision here. I don't think you're ever going to have a perfect time to do it. But I think the best thing we need to do is wait until we hit the peak. But I understand he's in a tough decision. And he even said, our president even said, and I quote, "I'm going to have to make a decision. And I only hope to God it's the right decision. But I would say without question, it's the biggest decision I've ever had to make." Now, I don't know what his decisions have been in office, in private, or what else he's had to do. Because, obviously there's lots of stuff that goes on in government that we have no idea happens. But I would actually agree with that. This probably is one of the biggest points in his presidency. And his administration, in my opinion, there's several spots that where he and his administration have stumbled towards the beginning in his response. But let me tell you what, if he can find a way if he can find the right response to this virus now, if he can balance this correctly and minimize the number of deaths, I'd say there's a good shot he's going to get reelected, especially if Joe Biden stays as the prime candidate. We're going to get to that in a moment. But I'm just telling you what, he's got a good shot at re-election if he handles this the right way. But, so, really, what I'm trying to say here is, this virus is serious. I understand that this sucks. But this isn't going to just disappear anytime soon, and we need to be willing to do this as long as we can to help minimize the number of deaths that this virus causes. Or else our nation, not just the economy, but our people will die as well. Alright, we're gonna take a quick sponsorship break, and when I come back, we're gonna talk about Joe Biden being the presumptive nominee and whether he'll even stay the Democratic nominee by the end of this cycle. Hey YouTube. So I don't actually have a sponsorship for YouTube because I don't get sponsored through YouTube or on YouTube videos in any way. I only get sponsorships through Anchor and all the podcasts it spreads out. For those of you that don't know, Anchor is a podcasting platform to which you can upload your podcast and it'll distribute it to things like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, etc. And it also allows you to get sponsorships. And that's how I get my sponsorships. Frankly, I don't make that much to begin with, but at least it's something. But the problem is, they don't distribute that to YouTube in any capacity for obvious reasons. And because of YouTube's new, more restricted guidelines towards monetization, I can't make any money off of YouTube. So I'm doing this completely free. This is a completely free service to you all. But I wanted to let you know, because this is on YouTube, things come out a little later. Partly because I plan on adding video to some of my newer podcasts, but also because I want to make at least a little bit of money for the first few days off of my podcast. So if you want to see my podcast right away, and if you want to support me, you can go to anchor.fm/strandedpodcast or just search Stranded the Podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, etc. Again, that's anchor.fm/strandedpodcast. And as well as listening to my podcast on there, you could also just donate a few bucks if you have the money. If you do not have the money, don't feel obligated to donate anything. Even if you have the money, don't feel obligated. I'm not really asking seriously for that. But if you really want to support me, I would appreciate it as well. So go to anchor.fm/strandedpodcast and listen to all my stuff. Thank you. Have you been looking to start your own podcast? Well, allow me to introduce you to Anchor, which is actually hosting this podcast right now. It's 100% free, and it allows you to create your own podcast right from your computer or your phone. You can upload your audio that you record on your mic for your podcast and even mix it in with sponsorships to help you make money. It distributes it to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many other places, so you can actually have people watch your podcast in many different places. You can make money right off the bat. There's no minimum viewership for it. I'll be making money off this ad. It's absolutely incredible. And everything you need is right there in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. That's anchor.fm, or download the free Anchor app from the Google Play Store or the App Store from Apple. All right. Thank you so much for watching that ad. It supports my podcast. But for the record, whenever I'm doing sponsorships, I really do enjoy the company or approve of the company that I sponsor. I'm not just throwing these ads in purely just for the money, because to be frank, I'm not making much. Like, off my last trailer, as I'm recording this, I have made 4 cents off this podcast. So, in reality, I'm really not making anything. I'm just doing this for the heck of it. But anyway, besides the point. So, Joe Biden is now the presumptive nominee. Bernie Sanders is out of the Democratic race. Now, some people have pointed out he's suspended his campaign. He hasn't technically dropped out. True, but let me make this clear. Every single campaign, or just about every single campaign, just suspends it. And let me tell you why. They're not actually still seeking the nomination, alright? If Bernie Sanders was still seeking the nomination, if he still saw a path for him to win the nomination, he would continue his campaign. He wouldn't just suspend it. But the reason he does this, the reason he suspends his campaign, the reason every campaign just suspends and doesn't officially drop out, is simply because of the fact you can move your money around so much easier whenever you just suspend your campaign. And that's the real reason he's suspended. But everyone's pointing out, oh, you can still vote for Bernie. And you can, if you are a Democrat. But the thing is, you won't be doing too much. 100% guarantee you Biden will win before the Wisconsin primary. And before 538 took down the Democratic primary forecast, before Bernie dropped out, effectively. They gave Biden a 99.9% chance to secure the nomination outright in the convention. And they predicted it was much more likely to, they predicted it was also much more likely for no one. They predicted it was much more likely for no one to secure the nomination outright as well. So there's that. So all being said, Bernie is not gonna win the nomination whatsoever. Biden is your presumptive nominee. Or is he? And no, I'm not trying to imply Bernie has a chance. What I'm actually trying to imply is, will the Democrats replace Joe Biden with Andrew Cuomo? So this idea was initially floated around by Tucker Carlson, actually, funny enough. So, Fox News host. And I was initially thinking, oh, this is just a little silly idea that people had, but it was an idea that was floated around. It's starting to gain a little traction online. So, let's talk about Joe Biden. Now, to be clear, of all nominees that I supported, personally, there was 2 candidates overall on the Democratic side that if I figured if they got elected, it wouldn't be as bad. Number 1 is Andrew Yang. And you might be asking, Augie, if you're supposed to be a moderate here, why do you support Andrew Yang? And it's because, not necessarily for a lot of his progressive policies, because let's be honest, he's a very progressive candidate, he's a very different candidate. But I feel like, personally, that a lot of his policies that are a bit more radical would kind of be nullified by Congress. Similar to Trump, like his wall. Well, at least until he declared a state of emergency anyway. That's a different story, different idea. But for the most part, Trump's wall was stalled for the longest time because of Congress. Now, I don't know, I really doubt if Andrew Yang hypothetically were to get elected, were to get his $1,000 a month plan through a state of emergency. I mean, we'll never know. Unless he runs it again in 2024 and somehow wins. But no, in all seriousness though. But he was one of my favorites because he seemed to be relatively smart, willing to work with both sides of the aisle, and kind of knew what he was doing. And then the other candidate was Joe Biden, not because I'm a fan of him, but because he was a more moderate candidate. I mean, he's changed some of his policies to be more in line with the left and progressives now to try to woo over some of Bernie's supporters. Because a lot of them online are saying, I'm not voting for Joe. Which, by the way, if you're a Democrat, you're just increasing your chances of re-electing Trump by doing that, by the way. Just so you know. But Joe was a lot more moderate. Which, of course, as you know, I'm more of a moderate. Granted, I lean more on the right side of the moderate scale. But Joe is a lot more of a moderate candidate. And then there's the fact that, too, he is very old. Same with Bernie, but we'll get to that in a moment here. But, most likely, if you elect Joe Biden, you're actually electing his VP. Actually, no, let's talk about that, because we've all seen how Joe Biden talks and interacts with people. I'm sure we've all seen that one clip of him discussing the coronavirus where he makes literally almost no sense. You know what clip I'm talking about. If not, just Google it. It's everywhere at this point. I'd be shocked if you haven't seen it. But he doesn't know what he's talking about. There's so many clips of him not knowing where he's at. So many clips of him not understanding what he's doing. There's accusations of him coming out, which is kind of balanced with Trump's accusations, if you want me to be completely honest. But it keeps some people from voting for him. And that's gonna be a problem. There's a lot of people out there right now that feel that Joe Biden can't lead the country, which is a huge problem. I mean, we haven't had a president since probably Ronald Reagan, who was in mental decline. And even Ronald Reagan, his mental decline began after he was reelected. And that was for a whole different set of reasons. So, there's a lot of Democrats right now that don't feel comfortable with Joe Biden being the presumptive nominee. They don't feel that he can go up against someone as charismatic and, frankly, way more energetic than Trump. Although, keep in mind, whoever we elect this cycle will be the oldest president in U.S. history. If Trump is reelected, he'll be because he was already the oldest first-term president. But if we reelect Trump, he will officially be the oldest president. I mean, and same in this case, same with Joe. Either way, we're electing the oldest president in U.S. history this cycle. Unless this theory turns out to be true, where Andrew Cuomo becomes the nominee. But now, there's actually a poll that I saw. It was from some weird organization, to be fair, so take it with a truckload of salt. But I believe it said the approval for replacing Joe Biden with Andrew Cuomo as the Democratic nominee is 56%. So, if this poll is correct, which again, it very well may just be a bad poll. Outliers happen all the time in polling. I mean, we see that with all kinds of polls in the presidential election, the cycle, the governor elections, the congressional elections, all kinds of outliers exist. And then, of course, there's just frankly bad polls. A prime example of that would be the Rasmussen Report polls that Trump constantly retweets all the time. Although, actually, I'm pretty sure that right now they actually have one of his lower approval ratings. Because his approval ratings have actually gone up a little bit. Actually, they tanked a little bit since I last checked again. Oh yeah, they tanked a lot. They're kind of going back to normal. Yeah, for those that don't know, Trump had a spike in his approval rating for a while. But actually, even still, oh wow, even still, I'm looking at the numbers right now on Real Clear Politics. Rasmussen Reports currently has Trump at his second, in terms of his approval number, it's the second lowest of all the polls right now. And in terms of the actual spread between approval and disapproval, it's tied for the worst poll with Reuters. That's surprising. What's interesting, I'm wondering if Rasmussen changed their method. I'll have to do some research into that, because typically, for those of you that don't know, Rasmussen has a reputation of having significantly higher approval ratings for the president than the rest of the polling, which shows that it's probably not an accurate poll. Whenever you are that far away from the general trend, of course people say, oh, it means it's the real poll. No, it's not. Whenever you have a general trend from very reliable polls, Fox News, for example, I mean, you may not agree with their news network. I don't agree with everything on their news network, but they've got fantastic polling, to the point where the president criticized them because it wasn't saying good numbers about him. So of course he got mad. But Fox News is a relatively reliable poll. Now, granted, they have the highest one, but I mean, there's probably a range. But like the general trend right now is around 46% approval rating for the president, which, considering everything that's happening right now, not terrible. And that's what people don't understand. Trump has a genuine chance of getting reelected, despite everything that's happened. He has a good shot of getting reelected. It's not going to be in a landslide. 306 electoral votes is not a landslide. Because let me tell you something. Take away Texas from Trump in 2016. Guess what happens? Hillary Clinton wins by 1 electoral vote. I'm literally looking at the graphic right now. Actually, sorry, 2 electoral votes. She wins 270 to 268 if she would have won Texas. Which, Texas is a lot closer in 2016 than it usually is. So keep that in mind. If you can lose by one state, that's not, even if it's your largest electoral college state, that's probably not a landslide. Ronald Reagan, his second term election, was a landslide. This isn't a landslide. But what I'm saying here, though, is that Trump very well could be reelected by a closer margin, most likely, sure. Will he win the popular vote? Probably not. Could happen, but probably not. But could he be re-elected? Especially if the turnout is much lower than it was in 2016? And that's why Democrats are afraid right now of nominating Joe Biden. Because he's not charismatic. He would have a hard time going up against Trump. I know Democrats who are afraid of Joe Biden losing. They don't think he's going to drive out the youth vote. Now, do I think the youth vote is that important? No. I say it as a young person. They're not that important of a demographic, at least not right now. Get those turnout numbers up and maybe they will be one day. But at the moment right now, they're not an important demographic. But still, Joe Biden, people aren't excited to vote for him. I mean, if the Democrats are not careful, they will have another repeat of 2016. And that's why I think there's this small movement to put in Andrew Cuomo. Because look at the way he's handled the coronavirus crisis. I mean, for starters, admittedly, he probably botched the beginning. Same with Bill de Blasio. But look at the way people view him now. He's constantly put in the spotlight. He seems to be handling it well now. He's constantly in communication with the president and addressing the president and showing that he can be a leader. He's a strong, much younger and more stable guy. Even the president, right now for this virus crisis, has praised Cuomo, saying they're getting along. So it would make sense, at least some reasonable sense, for the Democrats to maybe give it to Cuomo. I mean, I'm a registered Republican. I'm going to give that caveat. So I don't really have a firm opinion on this one way or another. I don't really have much of a say. But then again, no one really has to say what the party does. But personally, I think for the Democrats' sake, they should. Joe Biden is nowhere near the candidate that Andrew Cuomo would be. And I almost wonder, as much as I didn't like Bernie, I almost wonder if not putting Bernie in for the Democrats was an electoral mistake. Because Bernie, I mean, even though he was a year older, he seems much more mentally sound than Biden does in terms of physicality. You know what I'm saying. So, should the Democrats have put Bernie in despite much different views from a lot of the party? I don't know. The truth is, I guess we're just going to end up finding out in November. If you want me to be completely honest, we're not going to know until the November election. So, Democratic primary, not Democratic. So, the DNC convention is in August now because of the coronavirus. We'll see what happens between now and then. Alright. Thank you all so much for watching this very first edition of the Stranded podcast. I know it was a little short, and it might have not been as organized as I'd hoped. I've got a lot of things going on right now for college and stuff, so it's going to take a lot of organization. So just bear with me these first few weeks while I kind of get a system going for this podcast. I will try to be back next Sunday with a brand new episode. Everyone have a happy Easter. Jesus has risen. Have a great rest of your week. And I'll see you all back here next Sunday.